He walked into the city's most elegant restaurant, wearing a worn-out army jacket, and everyone laughed. The waitress rolled her eyes, the manager looked away, and not a soul knew the truth. The quiet man they mocked once carried a call sign that didn't exist on paper, and before the night was over, he would save every single person in that room. The rain had stopped just minutes before he arrived. Daniel Miller stepped out of the shadows and onto the polished sidewalk of Arlington's Royale, the city's most prestigious fine dining restaurant. His boots were worn but clean. His olive green jacket, a faded relic from another life, hung on his shoulders, like a silent memory, the edges frayed with time, but still intact, just like the man inside it. He paused beneath the glowing gold letters etched above the door, as if deciding whether to go in. Then he walked forward. Inside, the ambiance was soaked in elegance, amber lighting, clinking glassware, and the low hum of jazz weaving through conversations. Businessmen in tailored suits, socialites with diamond necklaces, waiters in black vests gliding like shadows. Daniel didn't belong here, and he knew it. He didn't fidget, didn't look around nervously. Just walked to the hostess stand and said, "One table by the window." Amanda Blake didn't look up right away. She was scanning her tablet, perfectly poised in her pressed uniform, her red lipstick sharp like a warning sign. When she finally looked at him, her eyes flicked over his jacket, his boots, and finally settled on the light stubble on his face. She gave him a smile that wasn't a smile at all. "We're fully booked, sir," she said with professional sweetness, "unless you're waiting for someone." "No, just me," Daniel replied, calm as still water. "Window seat if possible." Amanda's smile twisted ever so slightly. "Well, there is one open, but it's not exactly what you'd call scenic." Without waiting for a response, she grabbed a menu and turned on her heel. Daniel followed her through the maze of tables, past a fireplace, past a grand piano, past couples clinking wine glasses and servers offering amuse-bouche with white gloves. Amanda didn't say a word as she led him toward the very back of the restaurant. She stopped beside a table near the kitchen swing door, the worst seat in the house. "You'll be cozy here," she said, with a chuckle, dropping the menu with a flick of her fingers. "Enjoy." She walked away before he could say thank you. Daniel pulled out the chair and sat down without a word. He placed his jacket over the backrest, revealing a plain black t-shirt stretched over broad shoulders. He didn't scan the room. He didn't frown. He just sat, like a man who'd been through worse and didn't care about minor insults. From across the room, Max Dalton, the restaurant's general manager, glanced over briefly. His gaze landed on Daniel just for a second. His brows pinched like a flicker of recognition, trying to break through, but then he shook it off and returned to speaking with a pair of investors at a VIP table. Unnoticed, the front doors opened again. A group of 4 men walked in. Leather vests, tattoos, scarred knuckles. No reservations, no hesitation. The maitre d' hesitated, but they waved him off and headed to the bar area, claiming stools, like they owned them. Daniel saw them in the mirror on the wall behind the bar, just a glance. His expression didn't change, but his left hand shifted slightly, just enough to place his fingers on the handle of his water glass, as if grounding himself. One of the men, a heavy-set guy with a snake tattoo curling up his neck, turned and scanned the restaurant lazily. His eyes swept past. Daniel paused for a second, then moved on. No one else noticed, but Daniel had. Amanda returned to the table a moment later, notepad in hand, posture stiff. "So, what'll it be?" she asked. Her tone had lost none of its edge. Daniel looked up at her eyes, the color of aged steel, calm, unreadable. "I'll have the prime bone-in ribeye medium rare," he said, "with the truffle mashed potatoes. And a glass of water." Amanda blinked. That's Our most expensive dish, she said, slowly, eyebrows arching. You sure you don't want to look at the specials? Daniel's lips curved, not quite a smile. I know what I want. Amanda hesitated. All right then, I'll put it in. As she turned, he added softly, almost to himself, I made a promise to someone. She glanced back. Excuse me. Daniel looked out the window, even though there wasn't much to see, but the alley behind the building. His voice was, even his tone, peaceful. I said, I made a promise to take someone to the best place in town, even if it's just for a memory. Amanda looked at him longer this time, unsure what to make of that. But she said nothing and walked off. Behind her, Daniel picked up his fork and started turning it slowly between his fingers, an absent motion. A rhythm. From the corner table near the fireplace, an older man, gray hair, gentle eyes, whispered to his wife. That man. There's something about him, like he's walked through fire and learned to smile through the smoke. Back at the bar, the biker with the snake tattoo leaned over and muttered something to a younger man beside him. The younger one nodded and slipped away, heading toward the back exit. No one noticed, except Daniel. His eyes tracked the reflection in the mirror. His fingers stopped spinning the fork. He exhaled quietly, leaning back, and for a moment time seemed to pause. The kitchen door swung open and closed every few seconds behind him, each time releasing a burst of clattering pans, hissing steam, and frantic chef chatter. The scent of garlic butter and seared steak wafted out in waves, followed closely by the occasional shout in Spanish. Daniel sat still. His table, wedged between a structural pillar and the kitchen door, was little more than an afterthought, a space used when the restaurant was desperate, or more often, when someone wanted to send a message. Amanda had sent one, loud and clear. Every time a server pushed through the doors, Daniel's chair trembled ever so slightly. Hot air rolled over his back, and yet he didn't flinch, didn't shift, just quietly observed. At a nearby table, a young couple exchanged looks. The woman leaned in and whispered something to her partner, while gesturing discreetly toward Daniel. The man shrugged. The woman frowned. Daniel had noticed, of course. He just didn't care. Across the room, Amanda stood behind the bar, arms crossed, chatting with a male waiter named Tyler, a lanky 20-something with slicked back hair and a smirk that came naturally. He was chuckling at something she said, and then she nodded toward Daniel's table. Tyler glanced over his shoulder, scoffed, and whispered, "What's he doing in here? Looks like he's about to sell magazines or something." Amanda laughed behind her hand. He ordered the ribeye, she said, eyes narrowing. The 78 one. Seriously, Tyler blinked. "What's he paying with scrap metal?" Amanda shrugged. "Maybe he's a lost hiker." "You saw the boots." They both laughed. Neither of them noticed Max Dalton watching from his table in the center of the room. The general manager didn't laugh. He'd been watching Daniel intermittently since the man arrived. There was something about the posture. The calm in his eyes, the exact way his fingers held the fork and knife even before food arrived. It gnawed at something in Max's memory, like a dream you couldn't place. At the same time, one of the leather-clad men at the bar, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a silver nose ring, stood up and walked slowly toward the hallway near the restrooms. His gait was casual, too casual. As he passed by Daniel's table, he made brief eye contact. Daniel didn't react. He simply reached for his glass of water, took a sip, and placed it down exactly 2 inches to the left of its original spot. The biker moved on. Seconds later, the kitchen door burst open again, and Amanda returned, balancing a tray with practiced grace. She placed the steak plate in front of Daniel, with a bit too much force, making the silverware rattle. "There you go," she said. Toned syrupy. "Bon appétit." Daniel looked up, holding her gaze longer this time. "Thank you," he said softly. Amanda lingered for half a second, maybe expecting a complaint, a correction, or some hint of weakness. But Daniel simply picked up his knife and began to cut into the steak, precisely effortlessly, like a man who respected small rituals. She walked away unsettled. Behind her, Daniel took his first bite. It was perfect. But food wasn't why he was here. His eyes flicked to the mirror again. The man who had gone to the back hallway hadn't returned. Another biker, this one, with a crooked jaw and a patchy beard, tapped on his phone, then tucked it into his vest and leaned in to whisper to the bartender. The bartender looked nervous, but nodded. Across the restaurant, Tyler approached Amanda again this time, whispering more urgently. Amanda's expression shifted. "They're not regulars," Tyler said, motioning to the bikers. Amanda glanced over. "I thought you said they were in here last month." "Different crew," Tyler replied. "That guy at the end, he's got a prison tat on his knuckles." Amanda's gaze darkened. "Want me to tell Max?" "Not yet. Just keep an eye." Behind them, Max had already stood up. He was headed toward the kitchen when the lights flickered just once, a stutter in the ambiance. The jazz music hiccuped, paused, then resumed. Daniel didn't look up. He was watching the glass of water and the ripple now expanding across its surface. He pushed his plate slightly to the right, stood up calmly, and adjusted his chair by exactly 10 centimeters. It was a movement that didn't register to anyone else. But to those who had trained for it, it was a signal, a cue, a preparation, a habit too deeply etched to ignore. Amanda walked past again, glancing at him. "You're not finished?" she asked, eyeing the half-eaten steak. Daniel's eyes didn't meet hers. They were locked on the hallway. "No," he said, voice low. "But I think the night's about to change." Amanda frowned. "Excuse me." Daniel finally looked at her. There was no fear in his expression, no panic, just a quiet clarity. "You should check the back exit," he said. Amanda was about to ask why, when a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. Shouts followed. Something metallic clattered to the ground. Then, from the front of the restaurant, a scream. All heads turned. The man with the nose ring was now standing on a table, holding a serrated knife above his head. "Listen up," he roared. "Nobody moves! Nobody talks! Unless you want your last meal to be your worst." Chaos erupted. Max shouted for someone to call the police, but several phones were already lifted and no signal. Amanda froze her tray, still in hand. Tyler ducked behind the bar. Daniel, he didn't move. Not at first. He calmly reached for his jacket, slipped it on with practiced ease, and turned toward the growing danger. As the bikers fanned out and the kitchen was sealed off, one of them barked, "Lock the doors! No one leaves!" Daniel stepped aside, letting a panicked couple rush past him. He didn't stop them. Instead, he placed one hand on the edge of the table, fingers steady. Amanda turned to him, voice trembling. "Who are you?" Daniel met her gaze and said nothing, but the look in his eyes said it all. This was no ordinary man. The chaos had a sound. Not just the screams, the shouts, the clatter of silverware hitting tile floors, but a deeper sound, the kind only those who had heard it before would recognize, the hum of panic in people's throats, the rustle of adrenaline in the air, the tightening of time. And through it all, Daniel didn't raise his voice. He stood there, still steady, silent like the eye of a hurricane. 3 of the bikers were shouting orders. One blocked the front door, another had pushed a waiter to the ground and was tying his hands behind his back with a phone charging cable. The biggest of them, the one with the snake tattoo curling up his neck, climbed onto the maitre d' podium and waved his blade with theatrical rage. "Anyone moves, they get cut," he bellowed. "We're not here for your wallets. We're here to make a point." No one knew what point that was. Amanda Blake pressed herself against the wall, her fingers still trembling around the empty tray she hadn't dropped. She was staring at Daniel from across the room. Something about him made her eyes stay there. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't begging. He wasn't pretending to be brave. He just was. Daniel moved slowly, purposefully, and pulled his chair back under the table. A small, deliberate motion. He slipped his hand into the pocket of his jacket, pulled out a neatly folded napkin, and dabbed at the corner of his mouth. He had not finished his meal, but he moved like a man who had already digested the entire evening. A woman in a cocktail dress whimpered nearby. Her partner tried to pull her down behind an overturned table. Daniel caught Amanda's eyes, spoke 2 words. Stay low. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a warning. It was a kindness, spoken gently like someone giving you an umbrella right before the rain. Amanda nodded without realizing it. The biker with the crooked jaw stomped toward the center of the restaurant. Everybody get on the floor. Daniel sat down again, hands resting flat on the white tablecloth. His posture relaxed. Not submissive, just unbothered. That's when Amanda made a mistake. She stepped forward. The biker saw her and barked. "Hey, I said on the floor, sweetheart." He lunged toward her, shoving aside a chair. Amanda stumbled back, eyes wide. His hand grabbed her wrist hard, and in the blink of an eye, Daniel moved. No shout, no threat, just movement, a single flowing motion. He stepped between them, and with a smooth pivot of his body, redirected the biker's arm using only 2 fingers and the angle of his shoulder. The biker let out a confused grunt as his own momentum spun him off balance. Daniel caught him with a quick tap behind the knee, a takedown maneuver that looked more like a stumble, and suddenly the man was on the ground, flat on his back, his wrist twisted awkwardly behind him. Daniel stood over him, calm as still water. Amanda gasped. The room felt even quieter than before. The biker groaned, struggling to rise, but Daniel nudged the heel of his boot into the man's forearm, just enough pressure to make a point. Then he looked around the room, scanning the other assailants. "No one else needs to get hurt," he said clearly. Not loudly, but with weight. A young busboy in the corner whispered, "Who is that guy?" from the far end of the room. Max Dalton, the manager, had just returned from the kitchen, ducking behind the bar when things erupted. Now he stood frozen behind a rack of wine glasses, staring at Daniel like he'd seen a ghost from another lifetime. Daniel helped Amanda to her feet. "You okay?" he asked gently. She could only nod. "I didn't see him coming," she stammered. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Not judging, not angry, just present. "It's not your fault," he said quietly. "But you have a choice now." Amanda blinked. "A choice to panic," he said, "or to help others who can't move on their own." She nodded again. This time her eyes sharpened. Behind them, the biker on the floor moaned and rolled over, cradling his arm. Daniel turned away and walked toward the kitchen hallway, calm as ever. Another biker appeared at the entrance, holding a cleaver in one hand and a terrified line cook in the other. The biker looked confused when he saw Daniel approaching, not fast, not aggressive, just walking. "What do you think you're doing, huh?" "This ain't your business, Grandpa." Daniel stopped about 5 feet away, tilted his head. "I'm here for dinner," he said softly. The biker sneered. "Then sit down before I—" He didn't finish the sentence. Daniel's hand snapped up, not to punch, not to grab, but to tap the hot plate hanging on the wall, dislodging it with precision. The ceramic disc crashed onto the floor, sending the biker's gaze downward for just half a second. In that half second, Daniel had closed the distance. He stepped inside the man's reach, twisted his arm around his own chest, and guided the cleaver downward into the floorboards, burying it harmlessly away from anyone. The line cook stumbled back, eyes wide. The biker landed on his knees, and still no punches thrown. Only geometry, timing, leverage. As the man writhed on the ground, Daniel whispered, "Don't get up." And the man didn't. The rest of the restaurant, watching silently from behind tables, chairs, booths, had gone breathless. This wasn't some ex-soldier playing hero. This was something else, something practiced, precise. Amanda leaned against a column, her heart racing in her chest, her eyes locked on him. She whispered to herself, "Who are you?" Daniel turned, walked calmly back to his seat. He pulled the chair out once more, sat down, and placed both hands on the table, folding them. He looked out the window. His food was cold now. Didn't matter. From the hallway, the biker with the snake tattoo stepped forward, watching the scene he hadn't expected. He squinted at Daniel and said, "You're not just some guy off the street, are you?" Daniel didn't look at him, didn't answer. He just exhaled slowly and picked up his fork again. The silence in Arlington's Royale was no longer rooted in fear. It had shifted into something stranger, a quiet curiosity, a weightless suspense. No one moved, but everyone watched. Daniel sat at his table again, folding his napkin with steady fingers. The scene of two unconscious bikers lying near the kitchen and the bar had not caused him the slightest tremor. It was as if he had simply stood up to straighten a picture on the wall and sat back down. Amanda stood near the column, still holding on to its edge. Her chest rose and fell in short, controlled breaths. She couldn't take her eyes off him. Neither could Max Dalton. And neither could the old man at the corner booth near the window. He leaned closer to his wife, speaking low, almost reverently. "I served with men like that once. In Vietnam. They were ghosts in the jungle. Moved like mist. Looked ordinary until they weren't." His wife reached over and held his hand. She didn't speak. She just watched Daniel too. Near the bar, the remaining 3 bikers regrouped. One of them whispered to the leader, Alonzo Cruz, the man with the snake tattoo. Alonzo didn't answer right away. He was watching Daniel. There was no bravado in his stare, only calculation. The kind of stare you give a man when you're unsure if you've just underestimated something dangerous or stumbled into something you should never have touched. Tyler, the young waiter, had been hiding behind the bar. Now he was peeking through a rack of wine glasses, his voice a nervous tremor as he whispered to Amanda, "Did you see what he did? That wasn't normal. That was military right." Amanda didn't answer, but her fingers moved, reaching for her necklace and fidgeting with the silver cross that hung from it. A habit she hadn't done since her brother deployed 6 years ago. Daniel hadn't moved for several minutes now, just sitting, calm, breathing in rhythm, watching, except not with his eyes, with his ears. Because somewhere behind the swinging kitchen door, someone was unlocking something. He heard it. Most wouldn't. A soft mechanical click, a latch being tested, a metallic scrape. He shifted slightly in his chair, just enough to align the edge of the mirror on the far wall with the kitchen entrance. There. One of the bikers, the youngest, was examining the emergency exit, brushing flour off the lock, testing the latch, preparing a backdoor exit. Or maybe something worse. Daniel's right hand moved to the table's edge. He tapped once, then twice, rhythmically. Not random. Code. Only a few in the room would know what it meant, and one of them did. Max Dalton, still frozen near the end of the main floor, blinked. He looked at the taps, and something stirred behind his eyes. A flicker of memory. A desert. Smoke. A man with a bloodied leg whispering into a radio, while gunfire thundered all around them. Max whispered almost involuntarily, "It's him." Amanda turned. "What?" Max shook his head slowly, not at her, at himself. He stepped forward cautiously. "I think I've met that man before," he said. Amanda gave him a hard look. When Max swallowed. "Syria. 2013. There was a convoy ambush. I was embedded with a logistics unit, just support. Everything went sideways. Mortars, fire, we were trapped. And someone I never saw pulled me out of the wreckage. Said just one thing before disappearing. Amanda stared. What did he say? Mac's whispered eyes still locked on Daniel. Stay small. Stay quiet. Stay alive. Daniel didn't look back. He was still watching the mirror. From the kitchen, the younger biker slipped out and whispered something to Alonzo. Alonzo's expression changed. He smiled. Not the kind of smile that said everything's fine, but the kind that said he'd just made a new plan. One that didn't involve negotiation. He stepped forward into the center of the dining room and addressed the restaurant like a master of ceremonies. All right, folks, he said, blade still in hand. Seems we've got a tough guy in the house. Took down 2 of my boys. That's cute. His voice echoed slightly. No one responded. Alonzo pointed the blade toward Daniel's table. You think you're clever, hiding in plain sight. I don't know who trained you, but I've dealt with military types before. Daniel didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. Alonzo's voice sharpened. You think you can protect all these people? There's 4 of us and 1 of you. You're good, sure, but no one's that good. He took a step closer, then another. Amanda moved toward Daniel, but he gave her the faintest shake of his head. Not yet. The old man at the corner table slowly slid his wife behind him. Max's hands curled into fists at his sides. The air was thick. Even the jazz music had cut off now, leaving only the hum of light bulbs overhead and the distant buzz of neon outside the windows. And still, Daniel said nothing. Then finally, Alonzo asked, not with mockery, but with strange fascination, "Who are you?" Daniel met his gaze, calm, still. Then softly, almost as if speaking only to himself, just someone who learned a long time ago. That silence gets you further than shouting. That line hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, even Alonzo didn't know what to say. Then crash a pan flew from the kitchen door thrown by the terrified sous chef who had been hiding. It hit the floor with a metallic shriek, and in that split second of distraction, Daniel moved. But not toward Alonzo. He turned to Amanda. Take the right aisle. Lead them through the bar. Tell Max to bolt the back door. Amanda's mouth dropped open. What Daniel locked eyes with her. No panic. Only precision. Now. She obeyed. It started with the lights. Not a full blackout, just a flicker. A whisper of darkness that passed like a cold breath across the ceiling. Chandeliers blinked. Wall sconces pulsed. For half a second, everything in Arlington's Royale dimmed just long enough to unnerve every single person inside. Then the emergency lights kicked in, but it was already too late. The spark had ignited. Alonzo Cruz grinned as the shadows danced around him. He raised his voice louder this time, no longer trying to contain his rage. Lock the doors. 2 of his men rushed to obey. The front entrance was sealed with a steel rod shoved through the handles. Another man sprinted toward the kitchen hallway, slamming the service exit shut and bolting it from the inside. Panic erupted. People screamed. Chairs toppled. Someone dropped a wine glass that shattered like a gunshot. Amanda was moving now fast, but with purpose, doing exactly what Daniel had told her, guiding the elderly couple behind the bar, helping a waitress frozen in fear take cover beneath the booth. Tyler was crouched near the wine cellar, white as a sheet. Max Dalton, adrenaline now fully awake in his veins, dashed toward the back hall and slammed shut the fire escape, jamming a broom handle through the lever to hold it closed. He didn't know why he trusted Daniel. He just did. And Daniel. He had already stood. There was no flourish to his movement, no slow-motion hero shot. He simply rose from the table with the kind of quiet finality that made you feel like the night had reached a turning point, and no one else realized it yet. Alonzo spotted him and snarled, "I told you to stay down." Daniel didn't reply. He was scanning the room, calculating. There were 4 bikers still standing. Alonzo at the center, 1 guarding the front, 1 at the kitchen, 1 pacing nervously near the bar, hand twitching near his belt, probably hiding a weapon. Daniel's eyes paused on that last one. Target 1. Then he glanced up just for a split second and noticed a serving tray teetering on a wall shelf above the bar. He exhaled once and moved. With a quick sidestep, Daniel slipped behind a booth, launched himself toward the bar with fluid grace, and palmed a nearby chair, not to use as a weapon, but to kick backward as a distraction. It slammed into a decorative vase, sending porcelain crashing to the floor. The biker near the bar spun around instinctively, and that's when Daniel flicked his fingers upward and knocked the tray off the shelf. The edge caught the man square across the forehead. He dropped like a sack of bricks. Daniel was already on the move. Alonzo shouted, "Take him down!" The thug near the kitchen came charging, wild, heavy-footed knife in hand. Daniel didn't backpedal. He sidestepped at the last second, grabbed a fallen bar stool, and drove it into the man's legs. The biker tripped, stumbled forward, and Daniel used his own momentum against him, guiding the man's body into a spinning arc that ended with a brutal smack into the granite countertop. The thug collapsed in a heap. Gasps erupted around the restaurant. People peered from behind booths. A little girl clung to her father's chest, whispering, "Is he a superhero?" Daniel adjusted his jacket collar. He was just getting started. Now only 2 remained: Alonzo and the man guarding the door. The latter pulled out a small pocket pistol from inside his vest. Clumsy shaking aimed at Daniel's back. Amanda screamed, "Look out!" Daniel dropped. Flat. The bullet missed his head by inches and lodged into the mirrored wall, spiderwebbing across the glass in slow motion. Daniel rolled, grabbed the edge of the tablecloth from the nearest booth, and yanked. Dishes flew. Silverware scattered. The whole table collapsed, but the sudden motion caused the shooter to flinch. Daniel lunged. In one motion, he kicked the pistol out of the man's hand and drove his elbow into the attacker's chest. The man gasped, then collapsed unconscious. Only Alonzo remained. And suddenly, the restaurant was quiet again, eerily so. Everyone's eyes turned to the center of the room, where Daniel and Alonzo faced each other 10 feet apart. One breathing hard, but steady. The other, narrow-eyed lips curled, bloodlust boiling. Alonzo took 2 steps forward, knife still in hand. No more theatrics now. "You think you won?" he hissed. Daniel didn't answer. He just tilted his head, subtle, almost amused. Alonzo charged, fast. Daniel waited until the last possible second, then dropped low and caught Alonzo's wrist mid-swing. The blade missed his neck by inches. Daniel twisted the arm up behind, disarming him with such efficiency that the knife fell from Alonzo's hand before he even knew it. With one smooth pivot, Daniel pinned him face down against the white linen table. No blood, no broken bones, just precision. Silence fell over the restaurant. The only sound was the hiss of steam from the kitchen and the hum of the fridge compressors kicking back on after the power glitch. Max stepped out from behind the bar, mouth agape. Amanda stared at Daniel like she was seeing color for the first time after a life in grayscale. And Tyler, the terrified waiter, whispered aloud, Who is this guy?" Daniel didn't look up. He spoke just loud enough for the question to land. Just someone who learned to finish dinner before things got messy. Then he straightened, let Alonzo slump to the ground unconscious, and calmly retrieved his glass of water from his original table. Still cool. Still half full. He took a sip. No shaking hands. No heavy breath. No dramatics. Just calm. Because for Daniel Miller, this wasn't war. It was muscle memory. The room was still. So still, it made every breath feel loud. Every heartbeat a distant drum. Alonzo Cruz lay unconscious on the floor, arms spread like a man who had just fallen from a very high place and never expected the landing. His knife rested harmlessly a few feet away, glinting under the low emergency lights. Daniel Miller stood upright, not victorious, just composed. He straightened his jacket sleeve, brushed a speck of dust from his shoulder, then turned and placed the linen napkin gently over the edge of his table, as if all this had been nothing more than a slight interruption to dinner. Across the room, the first sound to break the silence was the soft clinking of a glass, a woman's trembling hands trying to set down her wine without spilling it. Then came a whisper. "Did you see?" "What he just did," another voice answered. He didn't even break a sweat. And then, near the bar, a young server muttered what everyone else had been thinking. He didn't flinch. Amanda Blake was still frozen halfway between the bar and Daniel's table. Her heart thudded in her chest, not from fear, but from something she couldn't name. Awe, confusion, maybe even shame. A few hours ago, she had rolled her eyes at the man in the weathered jacket and worn boots. Now she could barely meet his eyes. She took a step forward cautiously. "Sir, are you hurt?" Daniel looked at her gaze steady. "No," he said quietly. "Are you?" Amanda hesitated, then shook her head. "Not anymore." From behind the wine rack, Tyler finally stood up, legs shaking, eyes wide. "I thought you were just some guy," he stammered. "Like a mechanic or something." Daniel said nothing. Max Dalton stepped forward next slowly, like approaching a lion after it's finished eating. "I need to know," he said. Voice low. "Are you military?" Daniel paused. He looked down at the table where his steak had long gone cold. He reached over, picked up the water glass, and took another sip. Then he said, without pride or reluctance, "I was taught to stay quiet. Watch. Wait." He looked up at Max, and to stand up when others can't. Max's lips parted, a faint tremor in his jaw. "I remember that voice," he whispered. "Syria. You pulled me out of a burning vehicle. I never saw your face. You said, 'Stay small, stay quiet, stay alive.' That was you." Daniel nodded just once. Amanda covered her mouth with her hand, eyes shimmering. A few of the guests, still huddled behind booths and overturned tables, began to rise slowly. One by one. Like emerging from a fog, a woman in her 60s stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "I thought my husband was going to die tonight. I didn't even pray. I was too afraid. But you made me feel like we were already safe." Daniel didn't respond. He just offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile, the kind that came from somewhere deep, distant, earned. A police siren wailed outside. Finally, flashing lights bounced off the windows. The officers entered quickly, guns drawn, but were immediately met by a strange scene. No chaos. No gunfight. Just a room full of shaken people all pointing silently toward one man. Daniel raised his hands gently. "It's over," he said. One of the officers, younger than the rest, froze mid-step. His eyes widened as he recognized the voice. He lowered his weapon. "Wait, are you Shadow One?" Gasps rippled across the room. Amanda blinked. "Shadow what?" The officer turned to her, still stunned. "He's not just military. He's a myth, operated under ISA. They called him the Quiet Operator. They said he did things no one could confirm. Saved lives in places we couldn't even admit existed." Daniel shifted slightly. His face betrayed nothing. "Whatever you've heard he said was never supposed to be heard." The officer swallowed, nodded. "No reports." "Got it." The lead officer holstered his sidearm and radioed out, scene secured. Suspects detained. No casualties. And then, like a great exhale from the universe, the restaurant came back to life. Max pulled out a chair for Daniel. Daniel declined it. Amanda took a deep breath and approached him again. Can I ask something? Daniel raised an eyebrow. Why here? Why this place? You could have gone anywhere. Daniel reached into his wallet and pulled out a small, worn photograph. A little girl with curly hair and the world's brightest smile. Amanda's breath caught. Daniel looked at her, then at Max, then at the remaining crowd. Today's her birthday, he said quietly. She loves places with chandeliers. That one sentence struck like lightning through everyone present. Amanda looked at the kitchen door, then the shattered glassware, then the empty seat Daniel had first sat in, closest to the kitchen, farthest from the view. You asked for a window seat, she murmured. Daniel nodded. I made a promise. Didn't matter where I sat. No one said anything for a long time. Then Max' straightened voice, hoarse. We'll fix the dining room. Amanda stepped forward, her voice stronger now. But we can't fix what we did when we didn't know who you were. Daniel gave her a look that was both gentle and firm. You don't have to know someone's story to treat them with dignity. Amanda's throat tightened. I'm sorry, she whispered. Daniel offered a small nod. You're not the first. Won't be the last. And with that he turned, stepped over Alonzo's unconscious body, and walked slowly toward the front entrance as the police held the door open. Just as he crossed the threshold, Amanda called out. Wait, he paused, turning slightly. She walked forward, her voice trembling. Will your daughter still come? Daniel smiled. She's already here. And from behind one of the booths, a small voice chimed, Daddy. Everyone turned. And there stood Mia, 10 years old, curly-haired, dressed in her birthday dress, clutching the hand of a kind waitress who had hidden her during the chaos. Amanda gasped. Her hand flew to her heart. Daniel crouched down as Mia ran into his arms. He held her close. No words needed. Just warmth. Just peace. And outside the shattered restaurant, the night air was calm again. The restaurant was beginning to exhale. With the bikers zip-tied and lined up against the far wall, the officers started taking statements, moving quietly among the tables, like doctors after emergency surgery. But no one spoke about themselves. They all talked about the man, the one who didn't flinch, the one who moved like memory, the one who never raised his voice but somehow silenced chaos. Daniel sat at a table now, not his original one, but a new setting near the fireplace hastily arranged by Max and Amanda, a clean white tablecloth, a new water glass, a second attempt at a meal. Maya sat beside him, swinging her legs under the chair, still in her birthday dress. You didn't eat your steak, she said, poking at the cold plate someone had retrieved from earlier. Daniel smiled gently. Didn't have time. She tilted her head. But you still promised me dinner. He nodded. And I'm keeping that promise. From behind the bar, Amanda watched them, eyes glassy. Her hands were still trembling slightly, not from fear now, but from something deeper, the weight of realization. Tyler leaned over to her. He's not what I thought. Amanda glanced at him. None of us are what we thought. Then from near the front door came a commotion. Get back! That's a crime scene! One officer barked. But a voice answered, a slow southern drawl rich with authority. Not if the scene belongs to a federal jurisdiction. Amanda turned. A man in a dark suit had just walked through the door, flanked by two quiet men with no badges, no hesitation. They moved with the subtle confidence of people who had clearance to go anywhere, anytime. The lead man, early 50s, clean-cut with a black lapel pin shaped like an eagle wrapped around a sword, scanned the room, once then spotted Daniel. He walked over every step purposeful. Max watched from the bar, his brow tightening. Amanda leaned toward him. You know that guy, Max nodded slowly. Not by name, but I've seen that pin before, when I worked logistics for the agency. Amanda's eyes widened. You think he's I think he's the kind of person who knows things we're not allowed to talk about. The suited man reached Daniel's table. Maya looked up curiously. Daniel didn't rise. He simply tilted his head in faint recognition. Didn't expect you. The man gave a dry smile. I could say the same. Shadow 1 showing up in a steakhouse hostage situation. That's not your usual theater of operations. Daniel gestured to Mia. It was her birthday. The man's gaze softened. He looked at the girl and gave her a respectful nod. I'm glad you made it, sweetheart. Mia blinked. Do I know you? Daniel shook his head gently. He's just someone from the old days. The suited man turned serious again. This goes nowhere. Understood, Daniel didn't answer, which was all the answer he needed. But the man leaned closer, voice low. The way you handled them? That's not training. That's instinct. You still have it. Daniel replied just as quietly. It never left. I just stopped answering the call. The man studied him for a long moment. Then Command's been asking. Daniel raised an eyebrow. I've been busy being a father. They know. They respect that. But if the world goes sideways again, they want to know if the door's still open. Daniel didn't blink. I closed that door for a reason. Mia took his hand, as if sensing the shift. The man straightened, nodded. Good night, operator. He walked away. No threats, no pressure, just a quiet understanding between two men who had seen the world break and stitched it back together without expecting medals. Later, while police wrapped up, Amanda brought over a fresh plate. She set it down carefully this time, at the best table by the window, where the chandeliers glowed above and the music had softly resumed. Ribeye medium rare, she said gently. On the house. No interruptions this time. Daniel looked up at her. Thank you. She didn't move. She hesitated. I judged you. Because of your jacket, your boots, your silence. Daniel looked down at his sleeves, then back at her. You weren't wrong, he said. Most people don't see the story behind the fabric. Amanda swallowed. And the people who do, he gave a small smile. They usually need saving. Amanda blinked away, tears nodded, and turned to go. But before she walked away, Daniel added, You kept people calm, even when you were afraid. She stopped. That's not easy, he said. That matters. Her voice cracked. So does the way you ordered steak, like you'd done it 100 times, even though I treated you like dirt. Daniel didn't flinch. I was never here to impress you, he said softly. Just to keep a promise. She nodded and walked away, hands clutched behind her back, like a student dismissed by a master. As the final police car pulled away, the last guests were escorted out. The restaurant grew quiet again, but this time, peaceful quiet. Max turned off the overhead lights, leaving only the chandeliers and candles glowing. He walked over to Daniel Mia, now curled up beside him, head on his arm, dozing peacefully. Max cleared his throat. I owe you more than dinner, he said. I owe you my life. Daniel looked up, eyes steady. You already paid me. You rebuilt your life. That's more than enough. Max shook his head. I've got an office upstairs. Used to be storage. Has a view of the river. It's quiet. Safe. Yours if you ever need it. Daniel met his gaze. There was no emotion in his face, but there was gratitude in his silence. He nodded once. And with that, Max placed a business card on the table and walked away. Daniel turned to Mia, brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, and whispered, Old skills never die, kiddo. We just use them to protect better things now. And outside, the night stretched long and still, wrapping around the restaurant like a soft blanket. No medals, no headlines, just a father keeping a promise. Morning light had just begun to stretch across the city skyline when the last police cruiser pulled away from Arlington's Royale. The restaurant was quiet now. Not the eerie silence of fear, but the warm hush of peace after a storm. Tables were being reset, broken glass swept into neat piles, coffee brewed in the kitchen wafting through the air like a reminder that life somehow always goes on. Daniel sat by the window. Mia rested beside him, her head on his lap, fast asleep. He gently ran a hand over her curls, eyes distant, calm. She hadn't stirred since she laid down safe, finally in the arms of someone who had promised she always would be. Max Dalton stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching quietly. Amanda wiped down a nearby table, her motion slower, now more deliberate, like every movement held meaning. "Hey," the voice came from the front entrance. A young police officer stepped back and no longer tense, no longer armed, just holding a clipboard in one hand and a curious expression on his face. He walked up to Daniel slowly. "I just wanted to ask," the officer said, glancing at the girl, lowering his voice. "You never gave us your full name. For the report, I mean." Daniel didn't look up. He just kept his hand gently on Mia's shoulder. The officer hesitated. "I know who you are," he added quietly. "Or I think I do." That caught Max's attention. Amanda looked over. The officer swallowed and took a step closer. "I was stationed at Fort Bragg, just a few years. But stories go around even in the quiet places. Whispered names. One of them was Shadow One." Daniel finally looked up. His gaze wasn't threatening, wasn't cold. But it was the kind of look that made the young man instinctively straighten his spine, like he was reporting to someone he'd never want to disappoint. "No one's supposed to know that name," Daniel said evenly. The officer nodded. "That's what made it stick." Amanda set the rag down. Max stepped forward. "Shadow One," he echoed. "That's not a call sign. That's a ghost story." The officer turned toward them. "No, it's real." Shadow One was part of ISA intelligence support activity. Off books, deep black. Officially, the unit doesn't exist. But the operators did. They were the best we had. Not loud, not flashy, just precise, untraceable, lethal. He looked at Daniel again. "You weren't just one of them. You were the quiet one. The one other operators called when they couldn't handle it alone." Daniel's eyes didn't waver, but he said nothing. Amanda stepped closer, voice soft. "You're telling me? The man I mocked for his jacket, the one I shoved next to the kitchen, he's—" She trailed off. The officer looked at her gently. "You had a ghost in your dining room." Max sat down slowly. "I remember now," he whispered. "It was Kandahar. There was an IED. We were pinned. Some guy pulled me from the blast zone with one hand while holding a radio in the other. Never saw his face. I thought he was a hallucination. Until now." He turned to Daniel. "You saved my life." Daniel said nothing, but the silence spoke louder than any confirmation. Amanda's eyes filled with tears again, but this time not from guilt or fear, from something closer to reverence. She turned to Daniel, voice trembling. "Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you stop us from treating you like you didn't belong?" Daniel's voice was soft, steady, "Because I wasn't here to be someone. I was here to be a father." That sentence hung in the air like incense. The officer nodded slowly, his expression solemn. "I won't put it in the report," he said. "Your name, your record, it never existed anyway." Daniel gave the faintest nod of gratitude. Before turning to go, the officer added, "But if you ever need anything, just call. I mean that." Daniel didn't answer, but he didn't need to. Later that morning, after the sun had fully risen, Amanda approached with 2 to-go boxes, one for Daniel, one for Mia. "They're on the house," she said, smiling through red-rimmed eyes. "Even heroes have to eat." Daniel stood gently lifting Mia in his arms. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. Morning already, she mumbled. Daniel kissed her forehead. Time to go, sweetheart. Amanda hesitated, then reached into her apron and pulled something out, a silver pin. It was shaped like a small lily worn at the corners. My brother gave me this before his last tour. Said it was his good luck charm. She looked at it, then at Daniel. He didn't come home. But you remind me of him. She held it out. Daniel looked at it for a long moment, then gently placed it in Mia's hand instead. She'll carry it better, he said. Amanda's lips quivered. She nodded. And then, as Daniel turned to leave, the entire staff stepped forward. Not planned, not rehearsed, but one by one, every cook, server, and dishwasher in the restaurant stood in silent respect, forming a path from his table to the front door. No applause, no cheers, just silence, the kind that says thank you. Daniel walked forward, Mia in his arms, boots echoing lightly across the marble floor. As he reached the door, Max called out, "Daniel." He turned. "If you ever want a job, there's always a seat for you at this restaurant. Interview needed." Daniel smiled. "Thanks, but I've already got the best job in the world." Mia grinned sleepily. "Being my dad." The doors opened, and just like that, the man who never wanted a name walked out into the daylight, leaving behind nothing but silence, a legend and a lesson no one in that room would ever forget. The sun had climbed higher now, pouring gentle light through the tall front windows of Arlington's Royale. The dining room still bore the bruises of the night, before scratches on the floor, chairs tilted at odd angles, one mirror spiderwebbed from a stray bullet. But the air was warmer, softer. It felt like something sacred had happened here. Daniel stood by the door, ready to leave. Mia was in his arms, clutching the small to-go box Amanda had handed her like it was treasure. Max Dalton hadn't moved from behind the bar. He watched them. Watched the man who had once been a shadow, now bathed in morning light, about to disappear again. And something inside Max stirred, an itch in his memory that wouldn't stop scratching. He stepped forward. "Daniel," he said. Daniel turned slightly. Max hesitated, then walked the rest of the way, slow and deliberate, until they stood only a few feet apart. "I need to ask you something," Max said, voice rough, "and I need you to be honest with me." Daniel said nothing, but his gaze was open. Max took a breath. "Syria. 2013. Logistics convoy. We were pinned under fire near Raqqa. I was trapped in a wrecked Humvee, leg torn open, bleeding out. Smoke everywhere. I couldn't breathe." His voice caught for a moment, but he pushed on. "A figure appeared, dragged me out, slapped a tourniquet on me with what looked like part of a uniform sleeve, told me 3 words: stay small, stay quiet, stay alive." He looked Daniel in the eye now. I never saw that man's face, never knew if he made it out. But I remember the way he moved, calm, controlled, like nothing could touch him. Daniel didn't blink. Max stepped closer. "Was that you?" There was silence, long and slow. You could hear the hum of the coffee machine in the distance, the click of a spoon stirring in the kitchen. And then Daniel reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small folded piece of cloth, old frayed, stained with something dark, and dried. He held it out in his palm. Max stared. His eyes widened. "That's..." Daniel nodded. "The same sleeve," he said quietly. "Ripped from my own uniform to stop your bleeding. I kept it." Max reached out, hand trembling, and took the cloth. He turned it over once, then again. His breath caught in his chest. This saved my life." He looked up. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Because saving someone isn't about being remembered," he said. "It's about being there when they need you." Max stared at him, stunned. I spent years wondering if that man was real. Thought maybe I made him up in the smoke. Daniel gave a small smile. I'm real, but I'm not the story. Max shook his head slowly, still holding the cloth. His voice cracked. No. You're the reason I have a family now. A daughter. A second chance. I owe everything to that moment. Daniel said nothing. Just placed a hand briefly on Max's shoulder. A gesture of closure. Max looked down at the cloth again, then carefully folded it and placed it in the breast pocket of his blazer over his heart. I'll carry it now, he said. Daniel nodded once, then turned to leave, but Max stopped him. One more thing, he said softly. Daniel turned back. Max's voice was low, almost reverent. You never told me your call sign. Amanda had approached from behind. She too paused, waiting for the answer. The entire restaurant seemed to still once more. Daniel hesitated, then looked at Mia, asleep in his arms. He brushed a hand through her hair, and finally said, Shadow 1. Amanda's breath caught. Max closed his eyes for a moment as if hearing a song he hadn't heard in years. Mia stirred. Daddy, she whispered, barely audible. Daniel kissed her forehead. Just talking to an old friend, honey. Amanda stepped closer, now voice shaky. I'll never forget what you did. Daniel looked at her gently. Then remember it for the right reasons. Amanda tilted her head. What do you mean? He glanced around the room. At some point in life, he said, you'll meet someone who looks like they have nothing. No status, no suit, no shine. Maybe they wear a coat that's a little too worn. He paused. Treat them like they matter anyway. Amanda blinked, tears forming. I will. Daniel offered her a small smile, then looked once more at Max. Take care of this place, he said. Max nodded. Always. And with that, Daniel walked out the door, sunlight spilling in behind him like a curtain rising on the final act. No spotlight. No applause. Just the quiet departure of a man who kept his promises and gave others the space to keep theirs. Outside Arlington's Royale, the morning had stretched into a golden, quiet calm. Birdsong filtered through the alleyways. Delivery trucks began humming in the distance. And inside the once chaotic dining room, time felt like it had paused. Not frozen, but suspended, like no one wanted to break the moment too soon. Daniel stood just beyond the doorway, Mia cradled in his arms, her head nestled into the side of his chest. She was still dozing peacefully now, as if the night before had never happened. Amanda followed him out gently, as if approaching something sacred. Wait, she called softly. Daniel turned, casting a glance over his shoulder. His expression was calm, but distant, the face of a man already slipping back into silence. Amanda stopped a few feet away, hands clasped nervously in front of her. I know you probably don't want to talk more, she said, but I have to ask. He tilted his head slightly, waiting. Amanda hesitated. Why this place, she asked finally, out of all the restaurants in the city, out of everywhere you could have gone. Why did you come here? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He looked down at Mia, at her small fingers curled loosely over the edge of his jacket. Then slowly he turned around, stepped back toward the window, where the sun filtered through the glass like honey. He spoke quietly. A promise. Amanda frowned gently. To her, Daniel nodded once. She asked me 2 weeks ago where the most beautiful restaurant in the city was. I didn't know. I don't go to places like this. He glanced up, eyes scanning the chandeliers, the white linen tablecloths, the shining floors still bearing faint scuff marks from last night. So I looked, he continued. Walked this street every morning, watched the people coming in and out, the way the staff held the door, the way the candles were always lit by 5. He paused. She saw the photos online, he added. Said it looked like something out of a fairy tale. I told her. On her birthday, we'd eat here. Amanda's lips parted slightly. But when you got here, she said, almost whispering, we treated you like Daniel held up a hand gently. You treated me like someone you didn't understand. He didn't say it with anger. He said it with mercy. Amanda looked away for a moment, swallowing a lump in her throat. I'm sorry, she murmured. Daniel nodded. I didn't come here to prove anything he said. Didn't expect a parade. Just wanted to keep a promise. One little girl. One dinner. One window seat. He looked through the glass where the table had been reset in the aftermath of everything, even if it meant sitting next to the kitchen. Amanda blinked fast, trying to fight the tears welling in her eyes. Daniel looked at her. I've seen war zones where men screamed for their lives. I've seen cities crumble and villages burn. I've been dropped into darkness and pulled out of places no one talks about. He paused, but nothing has ever meant more to me than this. He looked down at Mia again, brushing a lock of hair from her cheek. A birthday dinner I promised her. That's it. Amanda's voice cracked. Do you know how rare that is? She asked. To have someone keep a promise that's small. In a world like this, Daniel looked at her with the gentlest smile. That's why it matters. Back inside the restaurant, Max had returned to wiping down the front windows. He'd heard everything but didn't say a word. Just stood there, staring at the reflection of a man who had saved his life once in the desert. And again last night. Tyler emerged from the kitchen with a wrapped piece of chocolate cake in a box. He handed it to Amanda. I figured he said awkwardly, You know, it's still her birthday. Amanda took it, turned to Daniel. Before you go, she said, voice steadier now. This is from us. All of us. She held out the box. Daniel didn't take it. Instead, he looked down at Mia. Birthday girl, he whispered gently. Someone brought you dessert. Mia stirred in his arms, blinking sleepily. Then she smiled wide, that kind of smile only 10-year-olds and dreamers ever fully remember how to give. Chocolate, she asked. Amanda grinned. The good kind. Daniel set her down carefully, letting her take the box herself. Maya opened it slowly, her little hands tracing the edge of the cake slice like it was gold. Thank you, she whispered. Amanda knelt down in front of her. No, thank you. Then she stood, turned to Daniel. You know, after everything that happened last night, people are going to tell stories. They'll say you were a ghost, a myth, a soldier who vanished into the shadows. Daniel's expression didn't change. Amanda continued, her voice gentler now. But if anyone ever asks me what I saw, I'll tell them this. She looked at him firmly. A father kept his promise. Daniel didn't speak, didn't nod. But Amanda would remember the look in his eyes for the rest of her life, the kind of gratitude too deep for words and too sacred to shout. As they walked away, Daniel carrying Mia again, her small head resting against his shoulder, the birthday cake box tucked safely in one hand. The wind stirred the American flag above the restaurant entrance. And Max, standing at the window, whispered to no one in particular, a promise. Kept. Behind him on the host stand, Amanda quietly flipped over the restaurant's guest book and wrote the name of the final reservation that night, Miller Table by the window, forever reserved. That evening, just before sunset, Arlington's Royale looked different. Not because of the damage, it had been cleaned, reset, polished. The shattered mirror was gone. The candles were lit again. Every tablecloth pressed clean. But it wasn't just that. It was the stillness. Not the kind that came from fear, but from reverence. Amanda stood at the front podium, smoothing the edges of the reservation book with care. The restaurant was closed to the public tonight, but the staff still dressed in full uniform. Even Tyler had tied his black apron twice, just to make sure it was straight. Max adjusted the lighting dimmer with a practiced hand. He looked around once more, made sure everything was just right, then exhaled slowly. Amanda turned toward him. "They're here." Outside the tall glass doors, Daniel stood with Mia. This time he wasn't wearing his field jacket, just a plain white shirt sleeves rolled neatly, but the same stillness clung to him. Not tension, quiet presence. Mia wore the same birthday dress. Her curls bounced gently as she walked beside her father. In her hands, the little box of cake from earlier, now tied with a new ribbon. Amanda opened the door. "Welcome back, Mr. Miller." Daniel nodded once. "Thank you." Max appeared behind her. "We saved you a seat." No more looks, no more hesitation. This time, everyone knew exactly who he was. And yet, more importantly, everyone knew he had never come here to be known. Amanda led them past the center tables, now full of flowers sent by guests who had heard the story, past the fireplace, past the piano, where a soft instrumental version of "What a Wonderful World" played quietly. They reached the table, the window table. A single candle flickered in the center. 2 fresh plates, 2 sets of silverware, 2 cloth napkins folded into crisp triangles, and behind it, a view of the river catching the last pink light of the day. Amanda pulled out the chair for Mia. Daniel guided her into it gently, then took his own seat. For a moment, no one spoke. The room held its breath. Then Mia whispered, almost like she was still afraid it might not be real. "Is this the best table, Daddy?" Daniel looked out the window, then back at her. "No, sweetheart." Mia blinked. Daniel smiled. "It's our table. That makes it better than best." Amanda's throat tightened. She turned away quickly, blinking hard. Tyler approached with 2 glasses of water, placing them carefully. "No menus," Amanda said gently. "Tonight. The chef already knows." From the kitchen, the executive chef, who rarely stepped into the dining room, peeked out to nod, then disappeared again. Daniel said nothing, but his eyes softened. The meal arrived in courses: roasted carrots with honey glaze, baked halibut for Mia, bone-in ribeye medium rare for Daniel, the same cut he never got to finish the night before. Mia took her first bite and closed her eyes. She said. "This is better than cake." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Careful. That's a bold statement." She giggled. "I didn't say I wouldn't still eat the cake." As the evening unfolded, Amanda and Max watched from a respectful distance. There was no spectacle, no press, no speech. Just a father and daughter, laughing quietly, trading small stories, passing bites of food, sipping water, and smiling at each other across a table that less than 24 hours earlier had belonged to someone else. Now it was theirs. After dessert, Mia opened the cake box and carefully placed the candle Amanda had slipped to her earlier in the center. Amanda stepped forward one last time, lighter in hand. "May I?" she asked. Daniel nodded. Amanda lit the candle. Ma closed her eyes. Daniel watched her, and for the first time in years, he let himself relax. The scars didn't fade. The weight didn't vanish. But for one perfect moment, they didn't define him. Maya opened her eyes. "I made a wish," she said. Daniel leaned in. "Are you going to tell me?" She shook her head. "If I tell you, it won't come true." He smiled. "Then I won't ask." Amanda collected the dishes. As she turned, she glanced back at Daniel. "You made a promise," she said softly. Daniel met her gaze. "And you kept it." He didn't reply. But that look, quiet, peaceful, was more powerful than any medal or certificate ever could be. When they finally stood to leave, the staff formed a quiet line near the door, not out of duty, but respect. Daniel took Mia's hand. As they walked past Amanda, she stopped him with a soft hand on his arm. "There's something I want you to see." She led him to the host stand and flipped the reservation book to the final page. There, written in simple handwriting, was one line, Miller table by the window. Reserved every year Feb. 22. Daniel looked at it, then looked up. You didn't have to. Amanda smiled, voice calm. We wanted to. Max stepped forward, handing Mia a small card. It was hand-drawn, a sketch of her and her father sitting at the window table, candles glowing stars outside. On the back, you're always welcome here. Mia beamed. Daniel looked at them both, and for the first time in the entire night, said something unexpected. I'll see you next year. Then he opened the door, Mia's hand in his, and stepped once more into the quiet evening air. The door closed behind them with a soft click. But inside, no one moved for a long time, because when legends fade, they usually vanish. But this one, he stayed. Just long enough to keep a promise. The next morning, Arlington's Royale opened again. Not to a full house, not with a press release, but with quiet dignity. The front door chimed softly as early regulars filtered in, businessmen in jackets, retired couples holding hands, a single mother with her son holding a drawing in crayon that said, "Thank you to the quiet man." Max stood behind the host stand. Amanda moved through the dining room with a new rhythm, not rushed, not rehearsed, but present. Even Tyler, normally, all nerves and sarcasm, stood straighter, because something had shifted, not just in the furniture, but in them. They'd all been witness to something that hadn't come with fanfare or fame. Something quiet, real, sacred. And that kind of thing doesn't leave you the same. Around mid-morning, a young man in a tailored suit approached the counter. He looked sharp, confident. He barely glanced at the others before speaking. Reservation under Carter. Table for 2. Amanda checked the book. Yes, Mr. Carter. Right this way. She led him past the center booths toward a small table with fresh flowers. He looked around, frowned. I asked for something better than this. Amanda smiled politely. This table's one of our best. He raised an eyebrow. That one by the window looks better. He pointed to the table, the one Daniel and Mia had sat at the night before. Amanda didn't flinch. I'm sorry, she said softly. That table's reserved. He checked his watch, annoyed. I don't see anyone sitting there. Max stepped in gently. It's permanently reserved, sir, for someone who left something behind. The man rolled his eyes, muttered something about sentimentality, and took his seat. But Amanda didn't move right away. Her eyes lingered on that window table. Later that day, between the lunch and dinner rush, Amanda stood near the bar watching the light change across the floor. She hadn't realized how much she used to move through this place on autopilot, how often she scanned faces only to judge them before they spoke. But not anymore. Now, every person who walked in felt like someone with a story, someone with a reason, someone who might have been Daniel Miller on another kind of day. She reached for a cloth to clean the podium, but paused when she saw something tucked beneath the guest book. It was a folded piece of receipt paper. Old. Creased. She opened it slowly. Scrawled in blocky, simple handwriting were just 10 words. Don't ask who I am. Ask what I need. Amanda stared at it. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but clarity. Max came over, sensing the shift in her posture. What's that? He asked. She handed him the paper. He read it once, twice, and then he whispered, as if to himself. That's the whole thing, isn't it? Amanda nodded. That evening, just before closing, a man in a faded blue jacket walked in. Late 40s. Looked like he hadn't shaved in a few days. His boots were scuffed, and his eyes carried something between exhaustion and apology. Sorry, he said. Didn't know if you were still serving. I don't got much on me, but I was wondering if I could get just a coffee. Maybe sit for a bit. Amanda looked at him. Really looked. then smiled. "You can sit wherever you'd like." He hesitated, then pointed to a booth near the back. Amanda nodded. Or she offered gently we could set the window table for one. Candle and everything. He blinked. "That's the fancy table, right?" Amanda just smiled. "Tonight it's the kind table." He swallowed hard. "You sure?" She didn't answer. Just picked up a menu, walked to the window, and set a place at the most honored table in the house. And as the man sat, something unspoken passed through the room again. The quiet echo of a truth left behind not for glory, but for healing. Later that night, after the man had finished his coffee and stayed long enough to watch the streetlights come on, he folded his napkin carefully and left a crumpled $5 bill on the table. Amanda picked it up, then placed it back in the drawer. Beside it, she slipped the handwritten note. "Don't ask who I am. Ask what I need." She looked toward the window, where the candle still burned, where the chair still faced outward, where Daniel Miller Shadow 1 once sat without asking for anything except to keep a promise. When Max closed the doors that night, he turned off all the chandeliers except one, the one above the window table. Then he flipped the sign on the front door to closed and scribbled one final sentence on the bottom of the menu board outside. "Everyone has a story. Here we try to listen first." And inside, Amanda whispered to herself as she dimmed the last light. Some lessons aren't taught. They're served. Warm. The street was quiet again. Outside Arlington's Royale, the lamps cast soft circles of light across the sidewalk. A few fallen petals from the nearby planters danced along the curb, caught in the hush of a spring breeze. Daniel walked slowly, not because he was tired, but because he wasn't in a hurry anymore. Mia walked beside him, holding his hand with one of hers, and the little cake box with the other. Her birthday dress now had a tiny ketchup stain near the hem, and her curls had loosened into a soft, sleepy tumble. But her smile was still bright. "Daddy," she said, "can we do this every year?" Daniel glanced down at her. "Do what this? The candles, the window, the cake." He thought for a moment, then gave the smallest of smiles. "If you want. We'll make it a tradition." Mia grinned and squeezed his hand. "You always keep your promises." Daniel didn't reply right away, but he looked ahead, eyes tracing the sidewalk, like a man remembering every step he'd taken to get here, not just tonight, but for years. So much of his life had been built on orders, silence, and sacrifice. But this was the first time in a long time that his choices were about presence, not survival. As they reached the corner, they passed a diner, still open, still glowing with the warm haze of late-night regulars. Through the window, a young father bounced his baby in one arm while cutting pancakes with the other. Across from him, a woman laughed with tired joy, wiping syrup from the table. Mia peered through the glass. "That's a happy family," she said. Daniel nodded. "Yes." She looked up. "Do you ever wish we had more people like a mom, or a big family like Emily's?" Daniel knelt down beside her on the sidewalk, looked her in the eyes. "Sometimes," he said honestly. "But then I remember something important." What he tapped her chest gently. "I've got everything I need right here." Mia smiled and hugged him around the neck. Daniel held her close, closing his eyes for a moment, breathing her in. The warmth, the trust, the miracle of having something to come home for. They turned down a quieter street where the trees arched overhead like protectors. The hum of the city dimmed behind them. Daddy, Mia asked again. "Yeah. What was the scariest thing you ever did?" Daniel thought. He'd been dropped out of helicopters into black zones, crawled through tunnels too tight to breathe in, stared down the barrel of death more times than he could count. But tonight he knew the answer. Keeping still, he said. "When everything in you wants to move." Maya wrinkled her nose. Like hide and seek. He chuckled. Something like that. They walked on. Finally, they reached their apartment building. Modest. 2 stories. No security guard. But safe. Clean. Home. Daniel unlocked the door and let Mia run in first. She kicked off her shoes and danced toward the kitchen. "Can I light the candle again?" she called. He smiled. One more time. He stepped inside, closed the door behind them, and paused. On the wall by the entrance was a simple wooden frame. Inside it, a drawing Mia had made last year. 2 stick figures. One, tall one, small. Above them in crayon letters, "My hero." My dad. He stood there longer than usual. Then stepped forward, placed his hand on the frame, and whispered, "A promise." Kept. In the kitchen, Mia had already placed the last piece of cake on a small plate. She stuck the candle in the center and waited. Daniel struck a match, lit the candle, and turned off the light. They sat across from each other in the quiet. Mia folded her hands. Daniel mirrored her. She whispered, "Same wish as before." He nodded. Same answer as always. She smiled, then blew out the candle. That night, as Mia slept, curled up against her pillow, Daniel stepped out onto the balcony with a cup of tea in hand. The stars were faint, but there. The city below moved on, cars, sirens, laughter, life. He leaned against the railing and looked up, breathing in the stillness. He didn't need the world to know what he'd done. Didn't need medals, didn't need the story. All he needed was this. A child who believed in him, a promise he'd kept, and the quiet peace of knowing he'd shown up. Because sometimes the greatest victories aren't written in history books. They're whispered in a child's voice at the end of a long day. You always keep your promises. And that's more than enough. If you've made it all the way to this moment, thank you for spending your time with us. We'd love to know, where are you watching from tonight? Share your city or country in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us keep telling meaningful stories about kindness, courage, and the quiet heroes among us. From all of us here, thank you for watching, and may your day be peaceful and full of light.